Hi, this is Rishabh Rajan for Ask.Audio, reviewing Generate by Newfangled Audio. A very novel new synth, has some really interesting synthesis capabilities, and one of my favorite features on the synth is that it is MPE compatible. And later on in this video, I'm going to give you a quick demo of its MPE capabilities. Alright, so let's now check out Generate. Now I'm not going to do a preset demo. I'm sure there are other videos out there that have done that. And you can also try that out yourself. I want to focus on the synthesis side of things. So right now I've created this default-like preset. The three main modules we have here, let's quickly talk about that. We have this chaotic generator. Think of this as the main oscillator. Then there's a wave folder. Think of this like a distortion unit. And then finally there's the low-pass gate, classic West Coast synthesis style combination of a low-pass filter and a gate. Well, technically you get a full ADSR envelope here. Get a bunch of modulation options here, 2 envelopes, 2 LFOs, a sample and hold unit, and even a very basic step sequencer. There's this global section over here to adjust some global parameters, and of course a very effective and useful effects section. Finally, there's this output limiter, because with this synth things can get pretty significantly loud, so it's nice to have that limiter on. Alright, so let's talk about this chaotic generator. When I'm playing a note right now, we're getting this pure sine wave tone. So the chaotic generator is a combination of a pure keyed oscillator, as they call it, and this chaotic oscillator. And cranking up this knob will bring up that other chaotic generator. Now the different modes, there's double pendulum, vortex, pulsar, discharge, turbine. Very interesting names for synthesis elements, not typically seen in the synthesis world. But just to look at the manual over here, they define these different modes. So in pendulum, it's based on the modified equations of a double pendulum. So a double pendulum is basically a pendulum attached to another pendulum, and that creates some pretty interesting movements. So all right, let's have a listen to it. All right, so at this point, it just sounds like a pitched up oscillator. So this is the original, and that's the pitched up version. But once we start to introduce some of this chaos shape, things are going to change drastically. Interestingly, even at that 1% to 2% mark, there's some really interesting things happening there. And as we start to increase this, it starts to sound a bit more like an FM synth. Now at about the 75-76% mark, the sound starts to break up a little bit, settles in again, and then that's at full 100%. Now I am in monophonic mode. It does tend to sound different in polyphonic mode as well. Some really high harmonics in there. Alright, so a lot of fun you can have just playing around with these controls. This is the pitch control for the chaotic generator. Now you tend to hear this more when the chaos shape is at a lower value. So in this pop-up you can see it says only active when chaos shape is very small. So let's bring that chaos shape down. Now let's change the interval. I'll increase the chaos amount. Still kind of subtle. There we go. Alright, next we have this oscillator sync option. So you can sync this chaotic oscillator to the so-called non-chaotic oscillator. It gets a lot buzzier. Next we have this animate option, which will detune the chaotic oscillator, and you get that beating effect. You also get two sub-oscillators. And this is like a regular sub-oscillator. This one I believe is an octave below, and I believe this one is 2 octaves below. You can have both of them up. So technically we're hearing 4 different oscillators at the same time at this moment. Alright, so that was the double pendulum. Let's quickly check out vortex. So what do they say about vortex? Non-linearity, which causes signal part to get sucked into the center. This can cause hard transitions and high harmonics. Very biting lead sounds. Okay. It does sound a lot more aggressive. Maybe in the low register here. Alright, next let's check out pulsar. So pulsar is similar to pendulum but less stable. These unstable jumps can add a unique, almost vintage character to your sound. Interesting for pads. Kind of sounds like vinyl crackle in the background there. Now to make this a bit more like a pad sound, we could quickly turn on the reverb. Maybe give this a long attack, a long release. Alright, so it's not just about creating aggressive, gnarly sounds. Alright, so that was pulsar. Let's check out discharge. I'll turn off the reverb, get rid of that attack and release. Let's see what they say about discharge. Discharge can sound almost like static, which can give either a soft or grainy quality depending on how it's set. It can be nice for vintage sounds. Okay. Yeah, it definitely has that grainy quality to it. Alright, next there's turbine. Turbine can be very unpredictable, but I keep having fun with it, okay? It's called turbine because of the propeller shape it can often make when sync is on. Very interesting. Sounds very organ-like here. So let's try it with the sync button on. We're definitely getting that static noise-like sound as they promised. Alright, so that is the chaotic generator. You can just spend a lot of time playing around with these different modes and just playing with these controls to discover interesting sounds. But the next step we need to check out is the wave folder. So the signal comes in here and then you can drive the signal or wave shape the signal. Now there are different modes here. This 259 is based on the original Buchla 259 wave folder. Let's check out its parameters. Drive, number of folds. Gotta break the mix up to actually hear it. Symmetry. And if it's too aggressive, you can tone things down with this very subtle filter. It has a 6 dB per octave slope. Let's try animated. So animated is based on a warped and animated sine wave. So it's still wavefolding. So normally you get a static sine wave in the wave folder. This one is animated. You can see we're adding animation there to that sine wave. I like that this synth introduces a lot of movement without actually even making use of modulation. Let's try fractal mode. So fractal is based on the fractal geometry of a specific mathematical function. Can create a lot of harmonics very quickly. If you work with Absynth from Native Instruments, that also has a fractal mode. Let's try another oscillator here. Let's go back to Vortex. Alright, so chaotic generator, wave folder, and then finally the low pass gate. So currently the filter is all the way open, so we can bring it down. Add some resonance. The resonance control only works when the poles are higher than 1. Now we can hear it. And of course there's an ADSR over here. So if I give this some attack, bring the sustain down, give some decay. Alright, let's now talk about the modulators. So we get these 5 different modulators, or 6 if you include the sequencer. How it works is we click on it and then we get to adjust the controls. Fairly straightforward ADSR envelope here. Now if I want to connect this to modulate anything over here, I just have to hit the plus button. So for example, let's open up this filter frequency. Let's say the chaos shape I want to modulate. So I'll hit that plus button and I'll just click over here. Now we made a connection. And how much modulation we want, we can adjust by just clicking and dragging. Now the 3 versions of the envelope, you get your full ADSR, you get your attack, decay, I believe that's attack, decay, and release. And then you have attack, sustain, and release. So you don't have to use all 4 stages. Alright, so I'm going to go back to that default preset to really hear this. Alright, so that's what it sounds like when you play with the shape. So let's take the full ADSR envelope and plug it in here. The plus button was already on, so it makes that connection. Let's adjust the ADSR. Let's make use of the LFO as well. So let's say the square-shaped LFO, I want to assign that, oops, the plus button was still on, so it made the connection. To disconnect, you can just click again. I'll turn off this modulation option. Let's say we want to connect to maybe symmetry here. Standard LFO controls. Let's take the LFO over here and let's connect the sine wave. Again, turn off the modulation option there. Let's connect that sine wave to the filter frequency here. While we're here, let's also make use of the sample and hold. So let's take this step sample and hold, and what shall we connect it to? I'm going to disable this one here. How about the chaos amount? So I'll bring the chaos amount down and let's connect that to this thing here and tone down the amount a bit. Finally, we have the step sequencer. You have 4 different versions of the step sequencer. So this is the actual regular step sequencer. This is the glided version. So it glides between these values. And this kind of has like a ramp down shape, and this has a ramp up shape. All right, let's take the regular step sequencer and let's connect it to, how about folds? So click the folds thing here, click here, made the connection, adjust the amount. You can adjust the steps here. Playback, forward, backward, pendulum, random. Let's do a pendulum. I wish there was like a visual thing that shows us which step we're on. The EQ is fairly straightforward, very nice visual EQ. Chorus works well. Has this very nice stereo widening option. Very simple delay. And of course the reverb as well. So as you can hear, things can get really chaotic, as the name suggests. Alright, so let's now check out some of the MPE capabilities of this synth. It's fairly straightforward. You just have to turn on MPE, have a MPE compatible controller plugged in. I'm using the Roly Rise over here. And these are all the different MIDI outputs that you can assign to various aspects of the sound. I already have this patch created. Alright, so that is Newfangled Audio's Generate. So let's quickly talk about some of the pros and cons. Now, if you like Pendulate, you're definitely going to love Generate because it's kind of like the polyphonic version of Pendulate, with of course additional oscillator modes, additional modulators, and the 4 effects. In terms of the cons, I would say the ability to modulate the modulators would be really cool. So for example, if I wanted to modulate the rate of this LFO with some of the MPE controllers, that would have been really, really cool. But aside from that, I think we have a pretty decent synth here. So definitely check it out. This is Generate from Newfangled Audio, distributed by Eventide. Alright, so I hope you found this review helpful. This is Rishabh Rajan for Ask.Audio signing off, and I'll see you in the next one.